So sometime around 2008, I was working for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. I was at the office one day. A fighter walked in, a big guy, about 6'3", 270 pounds, mountain of a man, big lunchbox hands. And I walked over. I had seen this guy fight. He was a former champion. We'd never really talked. And so we got to talking back and forth, and the conversation turned very candid. And I said to him, I said, um, I really, when I used to watch you fight, I thought you wanted a way out. I thought you wanted to quit. I did. I saw that in him during the fights. And I mean, he wasn't in very good shape. He was sloppy. His body didn't look right. And I just, I saw that and I was very honest with him face to face. And rather than get this mean and angry look in his eyes and be like, well, to heck with you, you've never walked, you've never fought in a cage, how dare you say that? He surprised me. He was like, yeah, you're right. I thought about in life. He just thought about just quitting as a fighter, not just quitting inside the cage, but his life was in shambles in the mid 2000s, and he was very honest about it, and he talked very openly about it. And so after that conversation, we could have been not very close. He could have been like, yeah, that Frank guy's kind of a jerk. How dare him say that? I was saying that, by the way, factually, not critically. And I was saying that actually as a praise because at the time I made those candid comments, he had surprised me. He had transformed. I saw him in these fights where he didn't have good cardio. He wanted a way out. He wasn't fighting with a lot of heart. And then in a couple of fights, bam, 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 he put together 3 wins. It looked like a new person, completely transformed, completely redeemed. So I was actually praising him. He still could have been like, man, I don't respect you. But he was always. So when I was training at Robert Drysdale's, a lot, I would see Frank Mir in there quite a bit. And he was always very respectful and always very conversational. I think that spoke volumes about him because a lot of people would take things a lot more personal than he did. And this Frank Mir to me is interesting because you look at any of us and you look at the arc of our lives and the arc goes like this. We're a champion. Boom, we hit. There's an accident. We break our femur. We're doubting. We're wanting to quit. We're in shambles. Then the arc goes back like this. We win 3 big fights. We shock people. Then the arc goes like this, and the arc of our lives goes like this and this. And sometimes we count people out way too quickly. We stop believing in people. We stop believing in ourselves. We count ourselves out. And Frank Mir, the former UFC champion, could be a poster boy for redemption. He really is. If I could nickname him, I would call him sort of the comeback kid. He's a man, but he's the comeback kid. In fights, there were so many fights where this guy was down and out. He was getting pummeled. It looked like it's over for him, and boom, he would rise up, snatch a limb, or throw a kick, and bam, he would win. Todd Duffy, the Todd Duffy fight, where he's just about to get knocked out, and then he hits Todd Duffy and knocks Todd Duffy out. Frank Mir became clutch. He became the comeback kid. He became clutch. Now, he was knocked out 8 times in his career. That doesn't include the 2-time broken femur. He was knocked out 8. That's a lot of times. 8 times he's been knocked out or TKO'd. But he is a finisher. He's got big wins. He beat some of the biggest names. He's the only guy to submit and to knock out Big Nog. We thought the first win over Big Nog was a fluke. Big Nog supposedly had a bad staph infection, and then Mir came back and submitted him with that gruesome Kimura in their second fight. So Frank Mir was just a fascinating guy. And one thing that, I used to watch the way he trained. Frank Mir was doing like those little small intimate camps before they were in vogue, before Conor was doing them, before some other fighters were doing like building their own little mini camp, more like a boxer style, like a Mayweather style, where they bring in guys. So they don't just go to a gym and just train with killers every day and do that sort of thing. Frank Mir's training was very much tailored and catered to his needs, a small intimate camp. And at times it was like he's training with guys like they're not. He wasn't. At times it was like, hey, is he lazy? Does he do too little in training? I did think that from afar. But kind of like a Vitor Belfort, where kind of like the less is more. You could make an argument that those years, those Frank Mir years where he didn't appear to be doing grinding and killing himself in training, were actually good for him. He's 38 now, he's been fighting 16 years, says he wants to keep fighting, but he's probably preserved, he's saved some mileage on his body by not killing himself year round, day after day in a training environment, by carefully catering and building a camp. So long term, maybe it was smart. Him and Vitor Belfort is still fresh. He's pushing 40. And so sometimes maybe less is more in training. Although I'll say this about Frank Mir, and hats off to him. He went from what I considered to me more being a lazy fighter, a fighter who wanted a way out, a fighter who was fairly one-dimensional. He was a snatch a limb guy, or else he'd get tired. If he couldn't snatch your limb and submit you early in the first round, he'd gas, he'd get tired, and then you'd beat him up. That was the old Frank Mir. And then he started working with guys like Ricky Lindell, whose body of work speaks for itself, and they formed a really great team, a great bond, great intellectual and energetic bond. And he became a complete martial artist. I mean, you watch the fight against Roy Nelson. The old Frank Mir didn't take anybody down. Well, he took Roy Nelson down a bunch in that fight. He fought Daniel Cormier, and a phenomenal wrestler, one of the best wrestlers in MMA, and made it very very hard for Cormier to take him down. He's very stingy there. So his takedown defense went up. His cardio went way up. Right, the guy who used to gas and get tired, his cardio went way up. Striking, he's always been a good striker. I always thought he didn't trust the strike as much, but I mean, he knocked out a lot of guys. He knocked out Mirko Cro Cop with Mirko Cro Cop's head kick, right? Blew us away there. It was a boring fight until bam. Frank Mir, just a really capable guy, great athlete. I love the story, Frank Mir's wrestling career. For those of you who are trying anything and you have trouble believing early in something because you're not getting the results. Frank Mir, in the beginning of his wrestling career, started 0-9, 0 wins in his first 9 wrestling matches. And by his senior year at Bonanza High School here in Vegas, he was 44-1, 44 wins, 1 loss, and state champion. Right? So this guy's track record, every time people count him out, every time he is counted out, he rises again. You have to have that character, right? Yes, he does fall, but he rises again. He always rises from the ashes. So hats off to Frank Mir. He's no longer with the UFC after 16 years. He is moving on to what I don't know. I think he's serving a suspension from USADA from the Mark Hunt fight. But I really hope, I've learned over time, never count out Frank Mir. I've learned that. He's 38. Don't count this guy out. He's a commentator for Berkut now. He's going to be around a long time. Very bright guy. And just want to, just say thank you to Frank, and thank you for not wanting to beat me up that day that we had that candid conversation. A guy you could sit there and you could talk with and you could be honest with him and say, this is what I see, man, but I want to praise you because you've grown from that. You've redeemed yourself. You rise again. And I shook his hand like, man, you know what? You won my respect. I counted you out. You made a liar of me. I was wrong. I didn't see it in you. You got it in you. And I learned that. Don't give up so quickly on people, because a lot of times they still have it in them. And every time you doubt Frank Mir, go look at his history. Go look at his career. Go look at his wrestling career. Go look at him after that broken femur, one of the most painful injuries you can have, and he shredded all the ligaments in his knee. And he came back from that, a 2-time UFC champion. Very interesting guy, very smart guy, and a fighter's fighter. Hats off to you, Frank Mir. Take care, everybody. Have a good day.